Hi, welcome to Calm Down with James Eade. I'm James Eade, and why would I have a show about calming down? Well, it seems to me that we're all pretty much uptight right now. There's a lot of things, a lot of anxiety that's going around, and it seems like we can't have civilized conversations. We can't agree to disagree anymore. So I think we all need to calm down. This is especially true of people that are in recovery from addictions, and addictions is a plague that's sweeping across the country, and we can't talk about it. There's shame and blame to go around, and this show is going to help try to remove the sense of shame. If you've stumbled into addiction, you know, it's not always something that you can blame yourself or someone else for. It may be just one of those things that happens and you have to accept it, but you can recover. It doesn't matter how far down you've gone, you can recover. And, I'm doing the show out of a sense of altruism. I'm such a nice person, but I really want you to buy this book too, Freedom. Freedom is the story of my struggle with addiction and my struggle to recover from it. Because when I was young, my twin companions, my imaginary companions, were alienation and estrangement. And as I got older, I was still riddled with anxiety. And the way I dealt with it was the only way I knew, just to force my way through it, soldier on, fight through it. That's what I was taught to do. That's what I did. And I was largely successful. Lived in a nice place, drove a nice car, wore a suit and tie to work every day, had a nice compensation. Everything looking outside in was good, and looking inside out, not so good. So I self medicated, and I got to the point where I could no longer cope with what foreign substances were doing to my body. And I had to enter recovery, whether I wanted to or not. I had to. It was that or die. And the choice was pretty clear. My doctor told me that if I didn't get into recovery, I was going to die. And when he saw the expression on my face, he added, "I don't mean eventually." And so that got my attention, and I got into recovery. And I found that there are many ways to recover. And there are many ways, many programs that people use. And to find the one that works for you is the most important. And to find the ways you can calm yourself down, what works for you is most important. What works for me may not work for you, and what works for you may not work for me. But finding what works for you, finding what calms you down, that's the key. And when you get agitated, anxious, as I do probably on a daily basis, almost certainly I haven't strung the 24 hours together without feeling anxious or some sort of upset, angry, agitated, something that is disturbing me, something that I can't stand, only I can stand it. Because one of the things I've been taught is that feelings are not permanent, they pass. And this impermanence is a great comfort to me because even though I can feel like, if I don't change the way I feel, my head's going to explode. My head has never exploded and it probably never will. And so, I know now if I just wait, if I pause, if I take a deep breath in and out, I can feel calm. I can feel better because the body can calm the mind and the mind can calm the body. And so this is one of the tools and techniques. It's outlined in the book that I wrote, Freedom. And it's also outlined in many different programs. They have different ways, tools, and techniques, and you can learn. If you don't already have a technique, you can learn one to use, a tool that you do. You learn it before you get anxious, because once you get anxious, it's a little too late. I've never been able to make a good decision and calm myself down if I'm already agitated. But if I have the tool in my pocket and I realize I become aware that I'm agitated, I can pull that tool out and use it. And for me, it's deep breathing. It seems to be working for me on a daily basis. And I also have spiritual rituals that I do. I won't bore you with all of those, but I do them every morning so I can get calm, find peace and serenity first thing in the morning. And then I have the confidence, no matter how I feel, how wound up I get later in the day, I know that I can recover that sense of calmness, of peace, of serenity, because I already did it that day. So this is a show about learning the tools and techniques. And it's not dismissing the things that agitate you, that anger you, that get you upset, that wind you up. It's basically saying these things are going to exist, they're going to happen. You're going to be faced with these things and you're going to get agitated. I'm not a saint. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I don't remain calm 24/7. No way. But I have the tools and techniques that when I do get anxious, when I do get agitated, when I do get angry, and I become aware of it, I can use one of the tools that has been taught to me. I didn't make these up. I was taught to them. I had to be open enough to listen to what people were telling me, and to do a trial and error. Try it. Be open to trying something. See if it works. And don't give up on the first try. Keep trying. Give it the old college try. Try until you know it's either working or it isn't. If it's not working, discard it. If it is working, keep it. It's not rocket science, but we haven't been taught how to calm down. We haven't been taught how to recover. So this is a show that's dedicated to calming ourselves down because it's going to be a gift we give to each other and to all those in our sphere of influence. So stick around for the next segment of Calm Down with James Eade, and thank you for tuning in. Hi, welcome to this segment of Calm Down with James Eade. And we're going to ask our senior correspondent from Los Angeles to come on and tell us what he's struggling with today in terms of what's keeping him or preventing him from being calm. So, Rick Rosner, thank you for joining today's show.
Hey, so today I'm pissed off about CEOs of entertainment companies.
Okay.
So, for some historical background, the movies came to Los Angeles more than 100 years ago because Thomas Edison was a prick. The industry used to be in New York City, but if you were New York City, you had to use Edison's cameras, or his thugs would come beat you up and wreck your equipment. So these early movie guys in the like 1905, they just started moving west to get away from Edison. And they just kept going and kept going, and they got to LA and they loved the light, because we barely ever get rain. It's bright. The first movie studios were built without ceilings or roofs, and they just used daylight to light the sets. And these guys, they were rough and tumble bastards. They were, the Warner Brothers, Goldwyn, the guys who ran the early studios in the 30s and the 20s and 30s. They were pricks. They did the casting couch. They were ruthless, but they loved frickin' telling stories. So even though they were bastards, they liked a quality production. But that's not what we have running entertainment companies today, or a lot of U.S. companies. They're run by, private equity kind of. They don't give a crap about the product. They care about making, their own compensation and returning, money to the shareholders. And so I was looking at a couple things that set me off. One is we went on strike. The writers and actors went on strike last year for 5 months and won some concessions. Every time we go on strike, we're going on strike because we're getting screwed. I mean, we don't do it for fun. And you get a new deal that works for a few years, more or less, and then conditions change and you're really getting screwed over again. And like the issues in the strike 2023 were AI is coming to steal everybody's job, and nobody's getting residuals for streaming shows. It used to be all the shows were on networks. There were 3 networks in the 70s, the 80s. And you did a season of shows, 22 shows. They'd rerun them in the summer, and you'd get a check every time they reran your show. But now on streaming, that's not happening. Also, no more 22 episode seasons. It's now a season might be 8 shows. And so, you maybe work for 7 weeks scripting 8 shows, then you're looking for a job again. And only half of the Writers Guild is employed at any given time. So, and the sweet money that was there, where you could afford to buy a house has gone. So now you have writers who are working on shows, some of them living in their cars, some of them, living in a crappy, 600 square foot apartment with a roommate or 2, and driving for DoorDash, when they're not typing away. So we won some concessions, but the big entertainment companies have just said, "Fuck you, we're just not going to make anything." So since the strike ended 10 months ago, production, all types of production, are down 33%. Reality shows down 57%. In 2021, there were 6,000 or so production days. That's days when they're filming, in Los Angeles. In 2022, that dropped to 5,000 production days. 2023, during the strike, that dropped to 3,500 production days, and it hasn't recovered. It's still at 3,500 for this year so far. And the guys that run, David Zaslav runs Warner Brothers Discovery. Call it, what is it? WBD is their stock ticker, down 40% so far this year. The stock value is down 75% since the beginning of 2022. They lost $10 billion in the second quarter because they lost the NBA deal, which was, that was billions. But Zaslav, this guy who's presided over the company losing 3/4 of its value, and one of the guys we were striking against in 2021, he made $246.6 million in salary and other compensation. In the past 5 years, this guy who's, just reaming the company has been paid $419 million. Doesn't give a shit about entertainment. There's a Batgirl movie, costs $90 million. It's all made. It's all ready to go. He's not going to release it. He's just going to tank it. Nobody's ever going to see it. And he's going to take a $90 million tax write-off. Nobody's ever going to see the Roadrunner versus Coyote movie. I think already made. No, he's just going to throw it away and take a tax write-off. He just did it again a day or 2 ago with a frickin' another cartoon series. So that's what I'm pissed off about. These guys don't. There's an often cited statistic about the psychos who run companies now that 70 years ago, a CEO might make 20 times what a line worker might make, and might know almost every one of his line workers. Now a CEO makes more than on average more than 350 times what an average hourly worker makes. Doesn't know his people, doesn't give a crap. So yeah, that's what I'm pissed off about.
All right, Rick, and the Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner movie cancellation really got me upset. I'm going to have to calm myself down here. Oh, boy. The Batgirl, I remember the Halle Berry one. That wasn't all that good, although, I love her.
Wait, was that Batgirl or Catwoman? I always confuse.
You might be right, Catwoman.
So,
I
so
think
you
that's
have
my
a
bad.
couple good. Now that movie didn't get good reviews, but I've seen parts of it, and it's perfectly fine to watch on TV. It's kind of entertaining. And then there was another good Catwoman who was Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh yeah, another just wonderful person to watch on the
And so
TV.
not only do we not get to see the movie, but this actress doesn't get to be famous.
Right.
She worked her ass off, and to get to where she was, and I don't know who she is.
And
Did I
none of us will.
did I talk about how on Netflix in the top 10 movies for the week, like not top 10 new movies for the week, only 5 or 6 of them are actually newish. 4 out of them are freaking just new to Netflix movies that are 20, 15 years
Yes,
old that they're just throwing out there again. And yeah,
I've noticed that.
there's some decent movies, but it's just like it's an FU to the subscribers.
And it's as if it's new because it's new to Netflix, as though
Now,
nothing else exists.
admittedly, we had it. I mean, COVID was miserable, but we got a bunch of um, entertainment. They had some stuff that was built up. They thought, everybody's locked up at home. This is our chance to dominate the market, to build an anti-competitive moat. So
Yes.
all the streamers just threw everything at us, and we
Right.
were drowning in entertainment. But now it's the opposite.
And I thought Disney would win that because of all their store of
Well, nobody won because nobody was
Nobody did.
forced out.
Yeah. And the basic gripe I heard, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that the executives in charge of making these decisions are paid exorbitantly, and they're paid on a level that is just creating this income divide. That it's part of the income divide story, where people are really struggling to make ends meet, and there are people with so much wealth they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. The days of if you've got a staff writer job on a show that you're in the money at least for as long as the show runs, those days are over.
Yeah. And my favorite part of this was when executives would ship jobs overseas because they didn't have to worry about workers'
Sorry, the
comp.
hammering. We've got plumbing going on because California. You're in California too.
Yeah.
Has the same thing going on that's going on in Florida. Well, maybe I can yell about it next time, but that you can't get homeowners insurance anymore.
Right.
In Florida, it averages $11,000 a year just for insurance.
Yeah.
So for us, our insurance company quit doing business in California. So for us to find a new company, we have to replace the pipes in our house.
Right.
So that's the banging.
So in order to incur a large expense, you have to incur a large expense.
Right.
But I
interrupted you.
That's okay, because I was talking about the execs that ship jobs overseas, and so those people that depended on those jobs, we always had this idea of rewarding executives because then they would build more factories and add more jobs. But they were doing the opposite and shipping the jobs overseas because they didn't have to worry about workers' comp and things like that. So the labor was cheaper overseas. So we shipped the jobs overseas, and then we rewarded them with doubling their salaries or giving them big bonuses. And the company's stock price went up because they lowered the cost, and they were heroes. Yet the U.S. worker was hurt.
Yeah, I did some math during the strike, and I don't remember exactly, but I think the big 5 CEOs whom we were on strike against, the year I looked at, they averaged about $150 million each, which is just crazy money.
Right.
And, maybe some of them, like, what's his name, who runs Disney? Maybe some of them, I don't know, Disney's taking a hit too. But
their stock price is down now, but I thought and I still think they're going to be fine because of the tremendous amount of content that they have. But what you're pointing out is that they don't care about the product again anymore.
I
It's
think
not about
some do. I think Disney's guy, and I should remember his name, he might actually be worth his exorbitant salary. But the Warner Brothers guy, he just seems like, I don't know him, but he just seems like a dick who doesn't care about the product.
right. All right. So we can't generalize that all of them don't care about the product, but we have seen some signs that the product is, different than it used to be. And I do think that the product is still good when the writing is still good. And, the actors are the actors. I don't think they're, making exorbitant amounts of money and then just mailing it in. I think they're really crafting their art. And so there's still a lot of creativity that goes into producing films.
If people are allowed to exercise it, I would argue that the product is better than ever.
Right.
The process is shittier than ever. Like in the Guild, you get invitations like show up, we'll show you the movie or the TV show, and then we'll talk with the writer and or the producer and some of the actors. And the story is always this: when I started working on this project 7 years ago, 10 years ago, and they said everything takes like most of a decade to get to the screen, which
Wow.
is now some of that is helpful, like because you get notes and you rejigger and stuff, but I would argue that a movie that gets to the screen after 10 years of development, deals fall apart, it's no better after 10 years of development than it would have been after 3 years of development, 2 years of development. It's a process that eats up people's lives. I talked to a guy at the gym who I know has sold a bunch of stuff, and I asked him, on average, how many pitch meetings do you need to take on average before you sell something? He said 100.
Wow.
That's freaking ridiculous. Like, we used to pitch Comedy Central, and very nice people, very excited by ideas, but those people, the development people, might get pitched 2,000 shows in a year, and they only have the budget to greenlight what, 8 shows, 8 pilots.
Right.
It's so, I mean, it's their job to say thank you, and come back and to schedule more meetings, work on it, but it's never to say yes.
Right. But what's the fundamental gripe there? How do you improve the process? Nobody seems to be doing their level best to make it worse. They just seem to be inefficient.
Well, I mean, some companies have too many middle managers.
Well, that could be very true.
And it's their job to say no, because you say yes, then you stuck your neck out.
Right.
And some of it is structural and not easily fixed. You have more people wanting to do entertainment jobs than there are slots. And, that's hard to, I mean, now at least the technology makes it that you can make more stuff on your own.
Yeah.
Like when I was doing most of my pitching, you'd walk in with a piece of paper, and then you'd read off the paper.
Now
I think you want to walk in with sample episodes that you did yourself, and they might have terrible production value, but they do give you get to watch something instead of having to so I mean it's always been a tough business.
Yes. So when we're actually up against something that I think, from listening to you, it's not something that we can expect to change. So we have to work on accepting it's the way it is. Would you agree with that? Or
or workarounds. I mean, because
is there an industry to help people work around? Like, is there?
I mean, there are Disney, and I would think some of the other studios have excellent diversity programs.
Mm-hmm.
if you're talented and if you belong to some kind of demographic minority, you can sign up for a diversity program that'll get you slotted in. They'll teach you a bunch of stuff and they'll get you like an entry level job, and to allow you to show your stuff. And, as a white person, I could get pissed about that. But no, it's like if you're talented, you shouldn't be afraid of diversity programs. You'll eventually. I
agree. Yeah.
And you can generally, if you're out here, like a lot of people come to LA, they were the most talented person at their high school or the most beautiful. Absolutely. And they come out here and they drive like shit because they're rule breakers. They're the ones who got the hell out of
Podunk, Indiana.
Well, West Virginia. Yeah. And they're rule breakers, and then they come out here and they drive like they're rule breakers, and I get pissed off. Eventually, they're forced to get California plates on their car, and by that time, they've learned how to drive better.
So, what do you think of the industry in general? Do you feel like confident that it's going to be producing good product and people are going to get paid?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Though the nature of the product may change. Mm-hmm. Like Marvel movies, superhero movies are unlike anything that's ever been made before because it takes 10,000 people at dozens of locations around the world to make one of those movies. You've got people doing CG at in South Korea, in India, and where you've got people working on every aspect of the film, and it's great that 10,000 people get employed.
Sure. And how about I haven't seen any of these, but the Godzilla versus King Kong and those, I've seen several.
Yeah, I mean, I can't watch a whole one of those. Those
I haven't seen any.
They're really boring to me.
But I imagine their production value, they must cost a lot to produce. Let's put it that way.
They're another, movie that takes 8,000 people to make.
Right.
Though the process, I mean, I've never really super much cared about Godzilla.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a pissed off giant lizard who breaks stuff.
Yeah.
And I think in the modern films, you can communicate with him a little bit, and he'll if you can somehow explain stuff to him, but he doesn't understand words. But if you could do, like, I think there's a little girl in one of who somehow like empathizes with him and gets
Faye Dunaway.
I don't know, and then you got King Kong, and he understands quite a bit, but basically they're giant like destruction machines who are about as smart as dogs.
Yeah.
So I don't think they can sustain a 2.5-hour movie.
Okay. Yeah. I was just thinking in terms of like, is that the future in order to employ the most people, get the most people, the ability to live in LA, for example?
Well, no, I think LA quits being the headquarters within the next couple decades.
Okay.
Because for a couple reasons. One is we're going to have more hot as hell days, more 100-degree days.
That's true.
And people in the entertainment industry are spoiled babies. And I believe they won't want to put up with the discomfort. And so LA getting hotter and it becoming and the entertainment and you being able, everything, you can work from a distance.
Yeah.
Everything, I mean, movies are already shopped out all over the world. I think people will move to where they can be physically comfortable and live like the kings and queens of industry that they are. So that means moving north to, Vancouver.
Vancouver, yeah. Because
the whole
already underway.
Like I said 20 minutes ago, I said the whole industry used to be in New York, and it was really in New York until the 70s. The Tonight Show didn't move to LA until 1972.
Yeah.
So, New York lost the entertainment industry not that long ago. And I think, it could happen to LA.
I agree. Well, Rick, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the gripes that are keeping you up at night. I hope they're not keeping you up at night. That's just a phrase I use. And it's one of the things like, do we have to accept what's going on, or can we find workarounds? This is the question I ask myself quite a bit.
All right,
Do I have
here's one workaround.
Mhm.
It's not really a workaround, it's a work in. And the deal is you come to LA, you find a shitty job. You want to pick a good shitty job where you don't want to pick a job that pays you. I think we're up to almost $20 an hour minimum wage, but your minimum wage job, don't pick one where you see if you can find one where you can still kind of enjoy yourself. Like, being a barista is not the worst job in the world. You get to talk to people, as opposed to I don't know. There are plenty of wait staff jobs that are kind of sucky. But anyway, I had fun jobs. I bounced bars, and that's fun because I didn't generally tell people they were dickheads, but I knew it was part of my job description that if somebody was a big enough asshole, I could do something about it. And that made me happy. So you come
find
to
what
LA,
makes you happy. What works for Rick may not work for you.
Well,
But
see if
find what
you can
works for
find
you.
a job, that pays you enough to stay here and also doesn't make you miserable. And then develop a network of friends until somebody can hook you up with a production assistant job or an internship on on a show or a movie. And then once you're there, work harder than anybody else. Because the PAs, a PA crew on a show, they're the least experienced people. A lot of them got their jobs because their dad knew somebody.
Right.
And they're maybe a little spoiled. They might be a little dumb. And if you get in there and you work your ass off, you'll outshine those people, and they'll figure out how
Someone
to
will notice
get you another job, a better, the next step up.
Right. That's what I told my dad. This is off topic, but I told my dad when he asked me what was I going to do after college. I said I'm going to get a low-paying job at a big corporation and work my way up. That's exactly what happened. I started working for AT&T and just got
a PA job doesn't pay a lot.
Right.
You have to do a bunch of stuff that you prefer not to, but it's still really fun. And there are free snacks. There's the craft service table where there's free candy and chips and beverages. And, you might get to meet famous people, but don't talk to them because that never goes well.
Right. Right. So when you go into a bar, talk to a barista, what do you order, Rick?
I don't. My wife goes to Starbucks or Coffee Bean every once in a while, and she'll get something, and then she'll bring me back. She'll drink half of it and bring me back the rest. So whatever she gets, I have the rest of it.
I understand. Okay. Well, until next week, Rick, thank you for sharing. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And we will try to calm down between now and next week. Thanks again. All right. Bye-bye. That was Rick Rosner, senior correspondent from Los Angeles. And that's the end of this segment, but stay tuned because hi. This is the segment of Calm Down with James Eade that we hand off to a yoga therapist. And Yudhishthira, going to join me right now. Good morning and nice to see you again.
Good morning, my friend.
And we're going to talk about, we're continuing our talks about niyamas. We went through the yamas and now we're on the niyamas. And this is my understanding, and you have to pronounce this for me, but I understand it is devotional self-offering. And what is the Sanskrit or
Sanskrit, Ishwara Pranidhana.
Ishwara Pranidhana?
By the way, I also have to amend that and make sure that you understand. If one of my Indian friends were here, who spoke up, who learned Bengali or Hindi as a native language, that their pronunciation would be far more fluid than mine.
Of course, I totally understand, but I still would prefer you take a shot at it than I.
Sure.
All right, so I'm going to let you get to it, and I
All
might
right,
pop
great.
back if
Thanks.
I have any questions, but I hope I don't interrupt you.
All right.
Okay.
Well, good morning, friends. In sharing the yamas and niyamas the way that I have been through these weeks, it made me think this morning of, perhaps some of you are of an age that will remember Cracker Jacks in a box when you would open it up and the candy part, the popcorn part was good, but what you're always looking for was that little, the little toy, the little treasure inside. So I feel like, if I was a Cracker Jack box, you'd open me up and what you would get today would be Ishwara Pranidhana. And, the term or the words that James used before, devotional self-offering, those are the classic definitions, or English words that are used to define Ishwara Pranidhana. I actually prefer something more along the lines of a complete and conscious surrender to the divine. And this happens both in a moment by moment way as well as in a bigger way. That is, you can start your day, end your day, start any undertaking. Anytime you get into your car, you can turn yourself actively and consciously over to the care of God. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because there are some, it takes a little bit of, laying the groundwork about why would I even want to do this? What's the advantage of it? And I want to go, just sort of take a little sidestep into the 12 steps, because as you are probably aware that this is one of the ways in which Jim's life and my life have overlapped, is in terms of working with the combination of yoga and the 12 steps. And as I looked at the 12 steps this morning, I realized that this quality of devotional self-offering, that is a complete and conscious surrender to a higher power, is present in 7 of the 12 steps. When we admitted we were powerless over our addictions. And number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. I always appreciate the wisdom of making sure that we add as we understood him or understood her. Step 5, admitted to God, ourselves, and another human being. So admitting to God, having a dialogue with God, talking to God. Number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. There's complete surrender in that. That I cannot remove these problems, these flaws on my own. I can do my part, I can work, properly. But if I turn my attention, turn the needle of my spiritual compass to the true north of God, then, God will be able to take care of these things. Number 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. But then there's the step 11, which is like the biggest one of all. And it's sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. That step 11 could very well be a good expanded definition of Ishvara Pranidhana, this conscious and complete surrender to God's will. I want to back up also and make sure that you are, I probably shared this before, but in the practice of yoga, there are three main pathways that are laid out for us. And these pathways include the practice of union with God, and that's what yoga really refers to, is union with the divine. The word yoga, that's all it means, is union. And implied in that is union with the divine. So, for example, in the Western practices of yoga, we oftentimes have a very heavy emphasis on hatha yoga, the yoga postures, which I love. I've taught them for over 30 years. And they are an integral part of my life and an integral part of my yoga practice. But they are not yoga itself. They're a practice of yoga. But there are three main pathways to yoga that we describe. And one is called Gyan Yoga. Gyan Yoga is interesting because it is the most challenging path of all, because it requires us to move beyond the ego and observe dispassionately and objectively what is true, not what we want to be true, not what we think is true, not what feels good to us, but rather what is true. That's Gyan Yoga. It relies a lot upon discretion and discernment. Another path to yoga is that of karma yoga. And we oftentimes speak of karma yogis as being those people who are in action, doing things. One can be doing a lot of good things and never be conscious of God. That is not karma yoga. Karma yoga is when we are conscious of the divine as we are performing any action at all. Oftentimes it involves service to others. Now, the third path of yoga is called bhakti yoga, and it's oftentimes described as the path of devotion, not untrue, but it is oftentimes a way in which we begin to establish this sense of yearning within ourselves for something greater than what the world is offering us. And so the heart is always involved in bhakti yoga. But like all of yoga, including the yamas and niyamas, one cannot possibly take one path of yoga and separate it from all the others. If you begin to practice bhakti yoga, you're going to find yourself in whatever you do, having the sense of devotion, the sense of love of the sense of the natural love of your heart present with you as you are in action. And that will also guide your thoughts and your feelings. So these three paths are not really quite so distinct. But it's also helpful to understand that I'm looking at, I have some notes up here, that that all of the yoga practices will take us away from ego consciousness, like, I'm in charge of everything that's going on in my life. And the ego loves to say that. And how often does that work out? Not very often. Sometimes. But here's the thing, is that the practice of yoga will lead us to a level of soul awareness, or an awareness of operating from our higher self rather than from the ego. And with Ishvara Pranidhana, it goes like this. I wrote this down. Whatever one does that is right to do, it is done with God. That's the practice of devotional self-offering. Whatever one does, that's karma yoga, that is right to do, that's Gyan Yoga, is done with God, and that's Bhakti Yoga. So the three come really together. The practice of this continuous surrender to God is not, it's not owned by yoga. People of all faiths, of all religions, true people who have understood that the goal of any religion is to come into this union with the divine. And so, it can be true of any religion, but yoga is the thread that weaves its way through every religion. And one of my favorite practitioners of this continuous um, choice to put God first in every situation, behind every thought, behind every feeling, behind every action. That the one of the most thrilling accounts of what happens when we do this, because that's really what this is about, isn't it? Why do I want to practice the presence of God in my life? What's the advantage of it? And I encourage you, like all of yoga, treat it like an experiment. Because when it's an experiment, it means that you're not determining how it's going to turn out. You get to use yourself as the laboratory. Your mind is the laboratory in which you're working. The heart is the laboratory in which you are working. And you can assess for yourself when you go into your daily life, into every activity. And I'll give you a list of things that you can do to practice Ishvara Pranidhana. But there's one particular book. It's called Letters by a Modern Mystic. It's the diary of a man named Frank Laubach, who was, I forget what particular branch of Christianity he was part of. It was a Protestant religion. And he was a minister. And he was going on a mission to the Philippines, to a very remote island in the Philippines. And he was going to be there. He got dropped off for a year. The boat was not coming back for him for another year. So he had a year on his hands. And he was going there to bring the word of Christ to the people who were the native population there. Well, he got there and found out that the population had just recently been converted to Islam. There were imams, and that is to say, the Muslim clerics who were there and had already taken this population. By and large, they had all become Muslims. And Frank Laubach went there and decided, he asked, what can I do? What is the most Christian way that I can behave? And he realized it was not to change them from their belief, but rather to demonstrate to them what it's like to live with the presence of God continuously to the best of his ability. And that became his experiment. And so it is for the year that he determined that moment by moment, he was going to remember God's presence. And that whenever he forgot, he would start again. It's a simple little book. It's just so short. I have probably 3 or 4 different versions of this book. Here's another one, by the way, called Practicing His Presence, which includes the writings of another great soul, Brother Lawrence, from, I want to say, 15th century France, something like that. And he was a monk, but he did the same thing. Whether he was picking a straw off the ground or scrubbing a pan, whatever he was doing, he did it with a consciousness of God. Now, this requires, of course, first that we be able to have some sense of God. How do we establish some sense of God? And so I'd encourage you to, first of all, spend some time doing that. What is God to you? Words that come to mind are Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, dearest friend, my beloved. You know, the romantic poets, the Sufi poets, for example, oftentimes spoke of God as the beloved. And and so find a way, whether it's a guru, a picture of Christ, of Jesus, whatever it is that works for you. It could be a flower on your altar. That flower might represent, God to you. And so the first thing that is required is that we begin by establishing some sort of relationship, some sort of an identification that we can work with. And again, it started for me one way, and then it has become something else. So don't feel like where you begin is necessarily where you end. The understanding of God is not something that can be brought down into a single word. That's so much of a problem for so much of the world, is that you have all these people who say, my version of God is the best. And that's obviously ridiculous. But when it comes to you or me, find what works for you. And so maybe it's a quality of God: light, love, bliss, joy, peace, calmness, wisdom, and or a sacred sound. These are all ways that we can relate to the divine. So find one that works for you. The second is begin to learn how to pray. Praying is not the same thing as begging. Prayer is not a begging attitude that we carry into words. Prayer is rather simply the way in which we can speak to God. In yoga terms, we have two centers within us. One is ascending center, that's the point between the eyebrows, and the receiving center is the heart center. So pray from here, but listen with your heart when you pray. When you pray, learn to pray not for your desires to be fulfilled, but rather that your desires align with your higher power's desires for you. So God's will, not my will. Another thing is that you can do is to simplify your life. Now, one of the blessings I've had recently was to move out of a huge house in the Santa Cruz Mountains into a smaller place in San Jose for a year, and then finally into the studio apartment where I am now. And it's required every time that I remove and simplify things in my life. And in doing this, what I found was that I grew lighter and lighter and lighter. Another thing is to be kind to yourself. When you offer to God, what you have going on, don't offer just the problems and limitations. Offer the successes and your strengths as well. Another way to practice Ishwara Pranidhana is with breath, pranayam. That is, as you inhale, feel that you're inhaling the light of God, and that light is infusing every cell in your body. And finally, try to let go of opinions and attachments and likes and dislikes. When you speak, instead of saying, this is how it is, say, I wonder, what do you think? Or I wonder, I'm curious about this, and then begin your sentences with a question instead of a statement. It oftentimes is a great way to remain open to what's happening rather than what you want to happen, what you think should happen. So I think that's it about Ishwara Pranidhana. And let's see if Jim comes in here at this point. There he is.
You just I thought you were talking to me the whole time. That was a wonderful discussion of a very important concept. And, the 11th step is my favorite step. And I wanted to ask your opinion because I try to make conscious contact with the divine every day, but I need to prepare myself first.
Yes.
And one of the preparations, I say, I give thanks for being reminded to surrender to the moment, to be fully present. And that sounds like it's associated with what you're saying. It's not consciously connecting. I'm not ready yet to consciously connect to the divine, but I'm slowing myself down. I'm being in the now. I say the past is paralyzed, the future fraught, but the present is a gift. So be here now, remember. And it gets me to focus not on, what might happen or what did happen, but on where I am that moment in time. And it seems to be a very important step for me to prepare myself to get into the flow.
If I were going to identify what you just described, I would say that what you just did was to pray. And as I mentioned, it sounds like you're praying from here. You're aware of what you're saying. You're aware of the present moment, and you are offering yourself and the day, everything you do, into a greater power than your own. And so the question I would ask you is, what happens when you do that?
Well, the I think of it as a divine flow, almost a current, a vibration, and I feel like I'm getting in tune, attuning to, and that I know that I'm connected at all times, but I often, with my mind, can feel like I'm disconnected. And
Sure.
by doing this process, I feel as though I am reconnecting.
Well, this matter of practicing the presence of God is not impractical. And because when you do what you were describing, Jim, I suspect, is true for me as well, that my day flows more smoothly when I begin with a conscious awareness of the divine present in my life, and I open myself willingly to that presence.
Absolutely. And I know if I don't do these rituals and my day's not going so well, I can put two and two together and go, oh, yeah, I know
Well,
why.
and that was another question I was going to ask. Have you ever failed to do that, and how do things go?
Yes, it could not be clearer. The universe is reflecting this back to me. Do this
Yep.
practice. And so, even though sometimes I feel like it's work and I'm not, up for it, I don't feel like doing it, I do it anyways.
Yes.
And it's become a habit, so I don't even question it anymore. It's just a habit. It's just something that I do. And it has that effect. And if for some reason my life is askew for whatever reason, and I don't do it, for example, we were on a cruise in Japan, and so I wasn't able to do all my rituals the way I normally wanted to do them, and I noticed that I'd kind of been mailing it in. I hadn't really connected. I hadn't really surrendered, and so then I doubled down. And but that was the most recent reaffirmation that I need to do this on a daily basis.
Well, and that's the thing. And you mentioned the word habit, and it's really about this book I mentioned, and the man I mentioned, Frank Laubach. He determined he was going to make it a habit to remember God moment by moment, and he was not focused on his failures.
Mm-hmm.
He did not focus on the times that he forgot.
Right.
He focused on starting again and
Yes.
again and again.
Yes.
And in that way, he began to string together continuous moments of feeling the divine presence with him as he moved throughout his day, including, he was writing on a typewriter at that point, including being guided. And eventually, what ended up happening for him, and this is, by the way, sort of the promise of Ishwara Pranidhana, is that you hear the voice of God, that you are guided. And it's not like, it's not like a movie where, you're inside the
Right.
person's
Right.
head and you hear this awesome, James Earl Jones or something like that,
Exactly.
but instead what you feel is this clear guidance in
Yes.
your heart that lets you know that, yes, this is right to do.
It feels intuitively obvious.
Yes, it does. I like that. Intuitively obvious.
Yeah. And I also think that it's consistent with what I've been taught and what I do is that you can start your day over at any time. If I feel like I've lost it, I've forgotten I always say my superpower is forgetfulness, and I've forgotten what I did that morning. I can always just take a deep breath and remember how I felt that morning and reconnect. And it's just as simple as taking a deep breath, and I can start again because
It's
as
one
you
of
were
the
saying,
it's one of the well, I like the idea that, I would say it's a superpower to to be able to start again
yes,
many times as necessary. For so many people working as they do in offices and in cubicles, and where do you find a quiet spot? And
right,
so bathrooms and toilet stalls become sacred space because it's there that you can sit down and have a moment, a little bit of room on your own to regroup and say, let me start again right now. And the results are nothing short of miraculous in my experience.
I agree. It's amazing that when I start again, it's as if I had not forgotten.
Yes. Yes.
So thank you so much for being a part of this show today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm going to say goodbye now. I'm going to end the program, but you keep coming back and keep teaching us the yamas and niyamas. Thank you. Welcome to the final segment of Calm Down. And I want to introduce to you, my loyal listeners and viewers, Divya Lovewise, that wise yogi. And I would like you, at the end of every show, I'm a little bit agitated and worked up and all that kind of stuff. And I was wondering if there's something that you could do to calm me down. Could you just say goodbye to us in any way that you see fit?
Sure, I would love to.
I will take off and let you do that. Thanks again.
Okay. Well, bring yourself into a comfortable seated position, feeling your feet on the floor and letting your hands rest in your lap. Palms up or palms down is a great way to start bringing yourself back into center and focus with your own divine energy and letting go of anything that might have wanted to stick to us throughout the day that may be energy we don't want to carry throughout the day. So having this basic position, feeling grounded, even closing your eyes and taking a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And one of the ways we can bring ourselves back to center is observing with our senses what we can feel, the temperature of the air in the room, observing any sounds that you hear. Noticing any smells in the air. And then bring your awareness to your breath. As though you're watching it from the inside out. Watching the inhale wash into the body. And watching the exhale wash out of the body. Just like the waves of the ocean as they wash onto the shore. And if you find your mind still wandering, you can even place one hand on your lower belly and one hand on your heart so that you can feel with your hands this breath washing in and washing out. And with your mind's eye, visualize this inhalation and exhalation as an internal shower, clearing away your energy so that it's refreshed. It's rejuvenated. And it's restored. Releasing your hands into your lap. Just give yourself a few seconds of pause in this return to peace. Enjoying it. And when you are ready, you can open your eyes, wiggling your fingers and your toes, feeling grounded in your body, grounded in the best part of yourself. And you can go out into the world and carry that best part in the forefront of your mind and your heart.